In the heart of a bustling city, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air as Marcus Davis expertly managed the daily grind, his trendy coffee shop that had become a favorite among locals. The soft hum of conversations blended with the rhythmic sound of the espresso machine, creating a vibrant atmosphere that Marcus had worked tirelessly to cultivate. With his warm smile and friendly demeanor, he greeted each customer, making them feel valued and understood. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. The usual?" he asked, nodding toward an elderly woman who had just walked in. "Of course, dear. You know me too well," she chuckled, her eyes twinkling with gratitude. As he prepared her coffee, Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was more than just a business to him. It was a community hub where people from all walks of life could come together. However, amidst the cheer, a shadow loomed in the form of Sarah, one of his baristas. He had hired her for her skills, but her dismissive attitude towards certain customers had begun to gnaw at him. Marcus's brow furrowed as he noticed her interaction with a black customer who approached the counter. The man, dressed in a casual hoodie and jeans, was greeted with a sharp, almost condescending tone. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her eyes barely meeting his, as she absent-mindedly wiped the counter. The customer hesitated, clearly taken aback. Just a coffee, please," he replied, his voice low. "Yeah, we have a lot of options." "You might want to hurry up," she said, rolling her eyes. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he witnessed this interaction. He had always believed in fostering an inclusive environment, but Sarah's blatant disregard for the customer was a stark contrast to his vision. After the customer walked away, disheartened, Marcus approached Sarah. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. "Sure," she replied, her arms crossed defensively. "That was not okay. We treat everyone with respect here, regardless of their background." "You need to be more considerate," he said, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. "Whatever, Marcus. It's just coffee," she shrugged, dismissing his concerns. Frustration bubbled inside him as he realized this was not just a one-time incident. During a staff meeting later that week, Marcus could feel the weight of Sarah's condescension hanging over the room like a thick fog. As he outlined plans to improve customer service and foster a welcoming atmosphere, Sarah sat back, her smirk betraying her lack of respect for his leadership. "Look, Marcus, if you want to make it as a coffee shop, you need to stop with this everyone is special nonsense," she interjected, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Sarah, this isn't just about business. It's about community," Marcus replied, his voice steady but strained. "If we don't create a space where everyone feels welcome, we'll lose our customers." "Fine, but good luck with that," she scoffed, rolling her eyes again. After the meeting, Marcus felt the weight of her attitude pressing down on him. It was more than just frustration. It was a realization that he had to confront this issue head-on. The thought of her prejudices festered in his mind, and he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, as he closed up the shop, he made a decision that would change everything. Marcus grabbed a notebook and began to strategize. He would come up with a plan to gather evidence of Sarah's behavior, hoping to confront her with undeniable proof. He would disguise himself as a regular customer, blending in with the crowd, and observe her interactions without her knowing who he really was. It was a risky move, but he felt a surge of determination. As he scribbled down his thoughts, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just about Sarah. It was about standing up for every customer who had ever felt unwelcome, every person who had faced discrimination. Marcus took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He was ready to take the first step in exposing the truth, ready to fight for the inclusive environment he envisioned for the daily grind. The next day, Marcus Davis stepped into the daily grind, cloaked in a guise of anonymity. He wore a simple gray hoodie and faded jeans, a stark contrast to his usual polished appearance as the owner. The familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him, but today, it felt different, more like a battlefield than a beloved coffee shop. He approached the counter with a determined heart, ready to observe the very behavior that had ignited his frustration. As he stood in line, Marcus's eyes scanned the bustling cafe. Regulars greeted one another, laughter echoed off the walls, and the sound of milk frothing filled the air. However, It was Sarah behind the counter who caught his attention. She was busy preparing drinks, her expression stoic, her movements mechanical. When a young black man approached to place his order, Marcus felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. He watched closely as Sarah barely made eye contact, her tone clipped and unfriendly. "Can I get a medium latte?" the young man asked, his voice hopeful. "Yeah, whatever," Sarah replied dismissively, barely looking up from her task. "Just wait over there." Marcus clenched his fists, a wave of anger washing over him. This was what he had expected, yet witnessing it firsthand stung deeper than he had anticipated. He stepped forward, ready to make his presence known, but held back. Today was about gathering evidence, not confrontation. When it was finally his turn, Marcus approached the counter with a neutral expression. "I'd like a black coffee, please," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Sure, that'll be $3, Sarah replied, her eyes flicking to the register. She didn't bother to engage further, her demeanor cold and impersonal. "Thanks," he said, trying to inject warmth into the interaction. But Sarah simply nodded, her focus already shifting to the next customer, a white woman who had just walked up. "Hi there. What can I get started for you?" Sarah beamed, her tone suddenly bright and inviting. Marcus felt a pang of disbelief. It was as if a switch had flipped. Her attitude transformed entirely based on the color of the customer's skin. He took a step back, absorbing the scene unfolding before him. The white woman laughed at something Sarah said, and Marcus could hear snippets of their conversation filled with light-hearted banter. "You always make the best caramel macchiatos," the woman exclaimed, and Sarah's face lit up with a smile that had been absent just moments before. Feeling a mix of anger and determination, Marcus turned away from the counter and moved towards the back of the cafe, where he could observe without being directly involved. He spotted Sarah chatting with a coworker, her voice rising above the ambient noise. "Ugh, can you believe that guy? Just a waste of time," Sarah said, her words dripping with disdain. Marcus felt his heart race. She was talking about him, the very person she had just dismissed. "Yeah, I mean, who does he think he is?" the coworker replied, chuckling softly. "He thinks he can just come in here and waste my time like I'm his personal barista," Sarah scoffed. "I'm not here to serve just anyone." Marcus's face burned with humiliation and anger. He was incognito, yet her words cut deeper than he could have imagined. He took a deep breath, knowing he needed to gather more evidence before confronting her. He couldn't let this moment pass without documenting it somehow. As he stood there, he felt a surge of determination. He would not let Sarah's ignorance go unchecked. He needed to confront her, but first, he had to gather more proof. He took out his phone, discreetly snapping a picture of Sarah as she continued her conversation, unaware of the reckoning that awaited her. With each passing minute, Marcus felt the weight of the injustice pressing down on him. He had built this coffee shop into a community hub, a place where everyone should feel welcome, and yet here was Sarah, embodying the very prejudice he fought against. He knew he had to act, not just for himself but for every customer who had been subjected to her indifference. As he left the daily grind that day, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would gather the evidence needed and expose Sarah for who she truly was. The fight against her ignorance had only just begun, and he was ready to see it through. Marcus continued his undercover operation for days, slipping into the daily grind as a seemingly unremarkable customer. Each visit was meticulously documented in the hidden notebook he carried, his observations filled with Sarah's dismissive remarks and condescending attitude towards customers of color. The weight of his findings grew heavier each day, a testament to the deep-rooted prejudice that marred his beloved coffee shop. One afternoon, Marcus sat at a corner table, his laptop open but his focus elsewhere. He sipped his coffee, the bitter taste mingling with the frustration bubbling inside him. Across the cafe, Sarah was engaged in her usual interactions, her voice rising above the hum of conversation. "Can you believe this guy?" she said to a fellow barista, her tone dripping with derision. "He thinks he can just waltz in here and expect great service. Like, how entitled can you get?" Marcus's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. He made a note of her words, his pen scratching against the paper. It It was becoming increasingly clear that Sarah's behavior was not just a personal flaw but a reflection of a systemic issue he was determined to challenge. Later that evening, he met with Lisa, his friend and confidant, at a nearby park. They sat on a bench, the fading light casting long shadows around them. Marcus recounted the latest incidents, his voice low but filled with passion. "She thinks it's okay to treat people like that, just because of the color of their skin. It makes me sick." Lisa listened intently, her brow furrowed in concern. "Marcus, you can't let this slide. You've got to stand up for yourself and for the community. Have you thought about talking to someone? Maybe a lawyer?" Marcus sighed deeply, the weight of her suggestion hanging in the air. "I've considered it, but I'm not sure how much good it would do. It's just one person, right? Can I really make a difference?" "Absolutely, you can," Lisa replied, her voice firm. "This isn't just about you. It's about everyone who walks through those doors. You have a responsibility to speak out. It's not just your fight. It's a fight for all of us." Her words resonated with him, igniting a flicker of determination in his heart. As they continued to talk, Marcus found himself contemplating the broader implications of Sarah's actions. The coffee shop was more than a business. It was a community hub. He thought of the customers who came in seeking warmth, comfort, and connection. Each instance of discrimination tarnished that sanctuary he had worked so hard to create. The thought weighed heavily on him, filling him with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "Lisa, what if I took my findings to a lawyer?" he mused aloud, a hint of resolve creeping into his voice. "What if I fought back, not just for myself, but for the customers who deserve better?" Lisa smiled, the encouragement visible in her eyes. "That's the spirit. You have to show people that this behavior is unacceptable. You're not just a business owner. You're a leader in this community. Use your voice." Marcus nodded slowly, the idea taking root in his mind. He could stand up against Sarah, not just to protect himself but to foster a more inclusive environment at the Daily Grind. The thought of confronting her made his stomach churn, but the thought of remaining silent felt even worse. As he walked home that evening, the city lights flickering around him, Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. He envisioned a future where his coffee shop was a beacon of diversity and acceptance, a place where every customer felt valued. But first, he needed to confront the ugly truth lurking within his walls. With each step, he felt a sense of clarity. He would gather his evidence, consult with a lawyer, and prepare to challenge Sarah's discriminatory behavior head-on. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He could no longer sit idly by. It was time to stand up for what was right, not just for himself, but for the entire community he cherished. Marcus had been stewing over his plan for days, and now, as he stood in front of the Daily Grind, he felt a mix of trepidation and resolve. He had witnessed too much of Sarah's disdainful behavior towards customers, and it was time to confront her directly. As he pushed open the door, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him, but today it felt different, charged with an undercurrent of purpose. He spotted Sarah behind the counter, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face shadowed with indifference as she served a group of customers. Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. He walked up to the counter, his heart pounding. "I'll have a large dark roast, please," he said, adopting the same casual tone he had used during his previous visits. "Coming right up," she replied, not bothering to make eye contact. Her tone was curt, and Marcus felt the familiar sting of her dismissiveness. He could no longer remain a passive observer. He had to reveal himself. As she poured the coffee, he decided to strike. "You know, it's really interesting how you treat customers depending on their appearance," he said, his voice steady but laced with intensity. Sarah turned to him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she replied, a hint of annoyance creeping into her voice. "I've been coming here for weeks, and I've seen how you interact with customers of color. It's not just disappointing, it's downright racist." He leaned in slightly, locking eyes with her. The coffee shop buzzed around them, but in that moment, it felt like they were in a vacuum, isolated by the weight of their confrontation. Her expression shifted from surprise to defiance. "You're just being sensitive. Not everyone has to coddle you," she snapped, crossing her arms. Get over yourself. Marcus felt a surge of anger, but he fought to keep his composure. I'm not being sensitive, Sarah. I'm calling out your behavior. This isn't just about me. It reflects on the entire workplace. People deserve respect, no matter their skin color. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. You think you can just come in here and dictate how I should do my job? I don't have to like everyone. Your job isn't just about serving coffee. It's about creating an inclusive environment. If you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't be here at all, he shot back, his voice growing louder. The tension hung thick in the air, and for a moment, it seemed as if everyone in the cafe had paused to listen. Sarah's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. You have no idea what I deal with. I'm not going to change for you. Then you leave me with no choice, Marcus said, his heart racing. He turned on his heel, leaving her behind the counter, seething. He stepped outside, feeling the cool air wash over him, shifting from the heat of confrontation to the contemplation of next steps. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his apartment, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He picked up his phone and dialed Lisa's number. Hey, it's me, he said when she picked up. I confronted Sarah today. How did it go? Lisa's voice was laced with concern. Not well, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. She was completely dismissive, refusing to acknowledge her behavior. I feel like I need to do something bigger, but I don't know what. Have you thought about consulting a lawyer? Lisa suggested. You could get some advice on how to approach this legally. It's not just about you. This is a systemic issue. Marcus mulled over her words. That's actually a good idea. I need to understand my rights in this situation. The next day, he sat in a small law office, the walls adorned with diplomas and framed awards. The lawyer, a middle-aged woman named Karen, listened intently as Marcus recounted his experiences with Sarah. Unfortunately, what you're describing is not uncommon, Karen said, her brow furrowing. You may have grounds for a discrimination lawsuit. It's important to document everything you've observed, and it's equally important to take a stand. Marcus felt a flicker of hope. What would that involve? Karen explained the process, outlining steps he could take to protect both himself and his business. You have the right to work in an environment free from discrimination. Standing up against this kind of behavior not only helps you, but can also create change within your workplace. As he left the office, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had a plan, and he would use his voice to bring awareness to the issues that had been swept under the rug for far too long. He was no longer just a coffee shop owner. He was a man ready to fight for justice in his community. Marcus Davis sat at his desk in the back of the Daily Grind, his heart racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. He had just pressed the post button on a social media campaign that would expose the discriminatory behavior of his barista, Sarah. The carefully crafted posts included documented evidence of her condescending remarks and dismissive attitudes towards customers of color. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, as if the very walls of the cafe were holding their breath in anticipation. As notifications began to flood in, Marcus could hardly keep up with the barrage of responses. His phone buzzed incessantly, the screen lighting up with supportive messages from friends, loyal customers, and even strangers who resonated with his story. You're brave, Marcus, one message read. We stand with you. Another chimed in. It's about time someone called this out. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. Across town, Sarah was oblivious to the storm brewing. She was at a small cafe, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone, when a notification from her own social media account caught her eye. As she read through the comments on Marcus's post, her face paled. What the hell? She muttered under her breath, her heart racing as she realized the extent of the backlash against her. The comments were a mix of outrage and solidarity for Marcus, painting her as the villain in a narrative she had never anticipated. This isn't fair, she exclaimed, slamming her phone down on the table. A fellow barista, Jake, who had been sitting nearby, looked up from his drink. What's going on, Sarah? He asked, concern etching his features. Marcus is trying to ruin my life. He's claiming I'm racist just because I didn't like the way he ordered coffee the other day. Sarah shot back, her voice rising. Jake raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his tone. Come on, Sarah. Do you really think that's why he's doing this? You've been pretty rude to him and other customers. Rude? She scoffed, her defensiveness brimming. He's just playing the race card to make me look bad. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, back at the Daily Grind, Marcus was preparing for the inevitable ripple effects of his actions. He had received a message from Lisa, his confidant, urging him to stay strong and reminding him that change often came with resistance. Marcus took a deep breath and reflected on her words. He understood that exposing Sarah would not only affect her, but also the community around him. He felt an immense responsibility to create a safe space for all his customers. As the day progressed, the cafe buzzed with activity, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Customers whispered among themselves, discussing the unfolding situation. Marcus overheard snippets of conversations that echoed his own sentiments. People were ready for change, and they were willing to support him in any way possible. Did you see what Marcus posted? A woman said to her friend, eyes wide with disbelief. It's about time someone stood up to that kind of behavior. Absolutely, her friend replied, nodding. I've seen how Sarah treats people. It's unacceptable. Marcus couldn't help but feel empowered by their words. He approached a table where a group of regular customers Saturday. Hey, everyone, he said, his voice steady. I just want to thank you all for your support. It means the world to me. One of the customers, an older gentleman named Mr. Thompson, looked up with a warm smile. We're behind you, Marcus. You've built a great community here, and we won't let anyone tarnish that. Feeling a swell of pride, Marcus nodded, grateful for the camaraderie and solidarity that was enveloping the cafe. He realized that this fight was not just his alone. It was a collective stand against prejudice, a chance to foster understanding and respect within the community. As he returned to the counter, he noticed Sarah entering the Daily Grind, her expression a mix of defiance and confusion. She scanned the room, taking in the murmurs and the glances directed her way. It was clear that the atmosphere had shifted since her last visit. Marcus met her gaze, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. He knew that this confrontation was inevitable, but he also knew he was no longer the only one fighting this battle. With the support of his community behind him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever happened next, he was ready to face it head-on, knowing that he was not alone in this fight for justice and respect. As the sun rose over the bustling city, the air was thick with anticipation. News of Marcus Davis's campaign against workplace racism had spread like wildfire, drawing the attention of a local news station. Reporters arrived at the Daily Grind, cameras rolling, eager to cover the unfolding drama. They set up their equipment outside the coffee shop, creating a spectacle that attracted curious onlookers and loyal customers, all eager to witness the latest chapter in the story. Inside, Marcus felt a surge of mixed emotions, nervousness, determination, and a hint of hope. He knew that today could be pivotal not just for him, but for anyone who had ever suffered from discrimination. The atmosphere in the cafe buzzed with whispers and apprehension as the news crew prepared to interview him. Meanwhile, Sarah ambled around, her face pale, as she realized the gravity of the situation. It was one thing to ignore the consequences of her actions, but a whole different battle when the media spotlight illuminated her past. Marcus, are you ready for this? Lisa asked, her voice laced with concern. She had been his strongest ally throughout this ordeal, and her support meant the world to him. Yeah, I think so. I just want to make sure I convey how important this is, he replied, taking a deep breath. It's not just about me. It's about creating a safe space for everyone. Just speak from your heart. You've got this, she encouraged, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. As the first reporter approached, the tension in the air thickened. Marcus, can you tell us what prompted you to take a stand against Sarah's behavior? She asked, her microphone poised and ready. Marcus straightened his posture, his voice steady. I've always believed in creating an inclusive environment at the Daily Grind. When I saw Sarah's actions, her blatant disregard for customers of color, it became clear that I needed to act. This isn't just about one employee. It's about the culture we foster here. The camera zoomed in, capturing the sincerity in his eyes. The reporter nodded, encouraging him to share more. And how has the community responded? The outpouring of support has been incredible, he said, his heart swelling with pride. People are rallying together to stand against racism, and it's inspiring to see. We're not just fighting for one coffee shop, we're fighting for change across the city. Meanwhile, Sarah stood off to the side, arms crossed defensively, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. The weight of her past actions was catching up to her, and the scrutiny was unbearable. She had no idea that the news station had uncovered a troubling history, previous jobs where she had exhibited similar prejudices, leading to her termination. Now, faced with the possibility of losing her current job, she felt the ground shifting beneath her. As the interview continued, Marcus noticed a few of his loyal customers gathering outside. Their presence was a testament to the community's solidarity. With the media capturing the moment, he felt empowered to take action. "I want to address Sarah directly," he announced, turning his gaze toward her. The crowd hushed, all eyes on him and Sarah. "Sarah," he began, his voice firm yet composed, "your behavior has no place in this coffee shop or in any workplace. I've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Sarah's face blanched. "You can't do this. You're overreacting," she shouted, her voice cracking as panic set in. "It's not overreacting when it's about creating a safe and inclusive environment," Marcus replied, unwavering. "I won't allow anyone to perpetuate hate under my roof." As Sarah was escorted out, the atmosphere in the Daily Grind shifted. A sense of relief washed over the customers who had witnessed the confrontation. They began to clap, a wave of support washing over Marcus as he stood strong, embodying the change he wished to see. With Sarah gone, Marcus turned to the crowd. "I promise to create a space where everyone feels welcome. We're going to implement training for all our staff and hold ourselves accountable. Together, we will change this narrative." The applause grew louder, and the community rallied around him. In that moment, Marcus felt not only the weight of responsibility, but also the power of unity. Later that day, as news of his bravery spread, he received an award from a local activist group for his commitment to social justice. As the sun set over the city, Marcus Davis stood at the forefront of a movement, proving that standing up against injustice could indeed lead to a brighter future for everyone. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and watch this next video, which is very exciting.